We want them to grow out. We want them to get in calf for the first time at a time when we choose. We want them to grow out, come into the herd, get through their first transition period, assimilate themselves into the herd with the older herd mates, get a decent performance out of them in the first lactation, get back in calf at a time when we choose, get them back into the herd through the dry period, and on we go. We want these animals to have longevity. We want these animals to have resilience. We don't want them to get sick, ever. We want them to get back in calf when we want them to, and we want them to produce in ways that were unimaginable even 20 or 30 years ago. So these are not a bunch of Holden Commodores running around the paddock. These are Lamborghinis, Porsches and Ferraris, and we have to look after them. So what underpins a lot of this is basically applied science. Dairy farming, from my biased viewpoint, is the act of applying some very complex applied science. It is the most complex animal production system that I can think of, again showing my bias. So this morning we're going to explore some aspects of that. I'm not going to introduce the speakers to you through their bios. Their bios are sitting on the table. They're very extensive. You get to read about the sort of things they've done. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off. Each of the speakers has 14 minutes of discussion, or 14 minutes of presentation, followed by 4 minutes to allow for questions. So I would please encourage you to think about what sort of things you might choose to ask the speakers, because that makes the sessions more interactive and more interesting for all of us. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our first speaker up to the podium, a person who I've known for, how long, Ian? 25 years? Yeah. That's a nice number. Nice. It's a nice number. I'd like to introduce Dr. Ian Lane up to the podium. Ian is the principal or one of the principals of CIBUS, which is a research organisation based out of Camden, and he's going to start us off. Ian, welcome to the podium.
Is this thing working? It is working. Amazing. Look, it's a profound honour to stand up here and open up the session, and I'm really proud today to be able to introduce to you a number of early stage, mid-stage researchers, and I think really they embody the principles that we established when we were first talking about starting a Dairy Up project. And that is, we wanted to rejuvenate the assets for the Australian dairy industry, especially the New South Wales industry. There's an issue, and that is that we haven't developed assets to help dairy farmers into the future. There's a dearth of people with high-level skills, and what we wish to do is create a cadre of them. So I'm really proud of the people that are going to come up and talk to you today. Context. Really, the potential to unlock the cow is huge. We know that. We'll see some data in a minute, but it's an underutilised resource, and what we want to do is really harness more of the power in the cow. So if we look at the next stage, and John laid the ground beautifully, basically by saying, look, it's a circular issue. What we've got is an area where we want to look and be able to pluck the low-hanging fruit. We want to be able to identify what are the things in our process, our circular process of rejuvenation of the animal that allow us to move forward well. So subsequently, one of the things that's really nice about this particular point in time is to be able to tell you about a lot of the achievements of Dairy Up, but also to lay out the ground for some of the things we wish to do and then lay a challenge at the end. I particularly want to thank the farmer sponsors and supporters. Without you, there would be no research. We're able to engage with you on your farms, see what's going on, bring it back into the real world, and do the research that counts. It's the stuff that makes a difference to you is what we want to do. So, in saying that, we'll look a little bit into the future. So what's the potential? Pretty obvious. If you look at New Zealand, sorry, Rowan, the Kiwis have invested billions of dollars into semen. Tell me what they've achieved in terms of per cow production. Is it anything? It's there, the potential's there, but the delivery is not. So there's no real change in productivity in New Zealand over the years. We're doing slightly better, right? But we have remarkable resources in this country, high quality forages. You know, we've got the sponsors, DLF and others, and they are bringing us high quality forages. We've got people like Yanni Garcia's group working on improving forage. So we've got a forage base. We're also blessed with a remarkable access to high quality byproducts and grain. So we've got all the assets that are required to unlock the nutritional potential of the cow. Fortunately, milk prices are also favouring people to be more adventurous and adaptive, and we're seeing better production. So we have a long way to go if we want to achieve what the others in the world are achieving. But one of the nice things about Dairy Up is the engagement with a broad series of farms, 15 intensive, 15 extensive, and contact with many, many more allows us to be confident to say to you, Australian cows will do everything that cows anywhere else in the world will do in terms of productivity. So we have the potential to unlock much more milk production out of our cows. There's rapid increases in production that are coming from increased better nutrition. And that's true on a pasture basis, and it's true on an intensive basis. And as we adopt better technologies, we're going to unlock that potential. So there's a rapid increase in return for people who adopt these things. Fundamentally, improving your profitability with targeted, careful approaches will give you more profit. So the opportunity's there. So what's the potential? Potential's almost to double Australian production per cow. That's very obvious. We don't have to achieve that because the optimum in some systems may be different to the optimum in others. But the opportunity is massive. And while we do that, and Niall and the Minister alluded to this, we can improve our environmental footprint. And one of the things that's truly remarkable is if you look at the average New Zealand cow with 3850 litres of milk, it only uses 30% of its intake nutrients for production. If you look at a cow doing about 10,500, you know, 58% of the nutrients it takes in a lifetime go towards production. That's a massive difference. In fact, it's much more than a 30% difference in reduction in methane production. There's a need to provide a social licence for both those, for both production systems. Sorry, going the wrong way there. So with some of the work we did for New South Wales EPA as a function of the Dairy Up project, what you're able to see is intensity of greenhouse gas production or methane production as cows produce more. So bottom axis, as cows go up to 40, 45 litres of milk a day, the amount of methane per litre of milk drops from around 20 to around 12. It's nearly 100% difference. So we've managed to really reduce the amount of methane intensity by better production. And this is based on the farms in Dairy Up. This is modelled on those farms. And what it shows is a profound difference. So the old Australian benchmark, if you wanted to suggest, is, you know, sitting around that 18, 20 litres, and you can see those cows are having to do a lot more methane per unit milk than those below. So where to pick the fruit? And this is where we can see that the nest of suite of projects that are in Dairy Up integrate. So what you can see is that you've got this circular pattern that John so well described earlier on of calf to heifer, the heifer transition to lactation, later lactation, and of course the calf coming out at each level. So we can start to look at some of the projects. And midterm, the young researcher, Sarah Legg, she's looked at early life, and it matters. If you can get an extra kilo of weight at weaning, it is associated with an extra 1,000 litres of milk in the first lactation. It is a huge difference. It says that we've got to work hard on our calf. Barbara Birdo Rodriguez, we're so fortunate to have her in the country. She's working with the largest study in the world that we've conducted, looking at calf disease, sick and healthy calves, about 2,000 samples, looking at every bug. And what we've found is new viruses, better understandings. So And of course, Helen Golder's work. She's starting to look at the adaptive processes as an animal gets older. She's actually looking at the rumen to see how we might be able to change the rumen to get those extra kilos to make a real difference over time. So you've got young and mid-stage researchers really starting to hone in on how we get better results with our calves. So where's the future? We've got to get more out of the data we've got. We're very fortunate. We've got rich data sets, unique data sets worldwide, and what we've got to do is get more out of those. Early life interventions matter. So we're working on early life intervention to try and get a better outcome. We want to know about the cost of disease. If a calf's got the scours, what does that mean to it over a lifetime? We want to improve the facility design, and we observed that really poor, labour inefficient calf units were everywhere. Barbara and I had to climb in and out of some extraordinary circumstances, you know, just really poor facilities. So there's some issues around what outcomes do you want to have now. So effort in improving health and weight has immediate benefits. You know, you've got less sick calves. Dealing with sick calves is awkward. I think it's time consuming. It's disappointing sometimes. What we've got to do is we've got to avoid calf hood disease. Do not treat pestivirus lightly. There's a tone around the industry saying that this disease is not important or this virus is not important. It is. There's farms in this room where we had pestivirus on the farm, removed it, and the profound difference in calf health is absolutely extraordinary. So do not treat pestivirus lightly. And that's a significant outcome of Barbara's work already. There's a greater understanding of what bugs matter. There's a whole raft of bugs that we don't know about until Barbara's work, and she'll hone that. Rotavirus also matters. So that's another bug that matters. But here's a challenge for the farmers in the room. Far too often, facilities are filthy, awkward, highly contaminated, labour inefficient. Think about your own facilities and think whether an upgrade in calf facilities is not something that should be prioritised. You need to move that up the list of priorities to get better conditions, easier labour, more efficient, better calves. It's worth the investment. If I go to some of the further work, two young researchers, David Sheedy, Andrew Lane, this is some of the work between them. So heifer mating time, you've got evidence again that a lot of the pasture herds are not getting cattle in to milk at 24 months of age, let alone a target that might be lower and suitable. We're thinking at this stage, and Andrew's work will be later today, that 22 months of age or even lower may be more appropriate. So these heifers in the photo I love. It's such a beautiful group of heifers, but they're a failure. They're a failure because they're sitting at about 630 kilos and they're not milking, okay? They're over 24 months of age. They're going to go into their transition now, but they'll be 2 months later calving. That's a failure. It's not a success. You've got to think about lowering the greenhouse gas footprint, getting value out of these animals sooner. So, very simple. Mate them earlier if weight appropriate, and if they're not weight appropriate, the question is why. So you can achieve this. It just takes a little bit of tweaking, and that's an example of low-hanging fruit. So later transitions, if you want to change your production system, there's really good examples, and Karen Romano's in the room, and Karen's been leading an approach to get you more information that allow you to more easily change systems. And there's great examples, and many of them are in the room here, of people who've put in better production systems, and it makes a difference. So if you wish to, it's not just intensive facility design, it's also thinking about your pasture farms. How do you set your pasture farms up better to minimise walking, to maximise intake, to maximise pasture yield? So these things are at your fingertips. Data gathered from Dairy Up gives confidence about both production systems in what they deliver. So the comparative work that Dave Sheedy's leading, looking at the comparisons of disease between high producing or intensive and less intensive farms, That data gives you confidence to be able to speak about your production system and note its benefits. So it's social license that's critical. One of the bits of work, again, from David Sheedy is about fats in the diet. It builds off previous work we've actually done at Cybers, but it shows that there's real benefits around fats in the diet in terms of production and reproduction. But what David's showing is, in all probability, there's huge differences between production systems in terms of the fats in the diet. And the fats in pasture-based diets are very, very positive. So when I look at the more intensive herds and they're moving to an American model of maize plus cereals, I'd urge them not to go down the cereals route, but to stay with ryegrasses. So there's things there that I think are valuable for more intensive herds. Production, reproduction and health, we're going to be able to get really robust evaluations of the differences between systems in terms of production, reproduction and health. It's really an important area. Okay, so what things are we doing now? We're working towards early detection of one of the most important diseases of dairy cattle, which is ruminal acidosis. It is a disruptor. It has a high prevalence, and myself and Helen Gold are working hard to change that situation in terms of being able to detect it, prevent it, understand where the risks are. We're working on why our cows leave the herd early. And again, that work's important. If we can keep cows longer, we can have profound effects on the carbon footprint. Similarly, profit. One of the questions that's reasonable to ask is, will an extended lactation help in terms of reducing the risk of cows leaving the herd and giving them greater longevity? Okay, if you're not using effective transition diets for cows, do that now. It does make a big difference to the risk of disorder and disease in cattle. One of the things that I guess has chewed my craw for a number of years is really about the profound differences in risk of death and removal for cows with increased parity. So what we've been trying to do is understand not just the metabolics of it, but the epidemiology of it. So if you've got a group of cattle like David's had, and you do a cross-sectional study, and you've got a bunch of older cows, a bunch of younger cows still, there's a survivorship bias. What has happened in terms of risk of removal as we travel through time? Is that group of cows that are finishing lactation in the fourth lactation in any way similar to the cows that started the first one? Who's been lost? So there's significant issues that we're trying to get to understand in detail what's going on about metabolic disease, because it is such an important part of why we lose cows from the herd. So we've got a lot more to deliver. This is not a bad place to give a bit of a summation. We've achieved a lot from Dairy Up, but there's plenty more to adopt and do now. So we have given you, I think, for every farm, something that's important. Critically though, the thing that Dairy Up is doing is it's rejuvenating the assets for the New South Wales and dairy industry in terms of high quality researchers. And I'm so proud to be here introducing a bunch of people who really will make a difference for you in the future. But the challenge is we need to continue their funding. So we do need to tap all these colleagues that we've got around this room and say, look, next phase of Dairy Up will need broad industry support. We're looking for that. But you've got people who are supportable. We've been a bit profligate as a country. We haven't invested well in education. We haven't invested well in continuing the opportunities for mid-stage researchers. Often they wither on the vine because there's nothing to support them. So the challenge is here for us all to do better into the future and to provide a future for these assets that are yours. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Ian. Folks, we've got time for one, maybe two questions. Would anyone like to offer a thought or a question to Ian? Come on, folks, this is a bad way to start the day. There's got to be one question in the room.
Yeah, there we go. Somebody's asking you a question.
Thank you.
Ah, g'day, Neville. I can see you just. I need binoculars, mate.
I'm just sort of wondering in the potential of of the cow is really, really high, and what you're doing is really showing that well. The bit that sort of concerns me in the back of my mind from way back is that we've got a cow that's was originally designed by our creator to eat forages, and we're pushing it with really hard with really energy inputs and things, and really we can really make that drive really hard. But a lot of these inputs that have been going in the more recent years are actually food that people could eat, and we're using it again and again. Are we losing our efficiency in actually not very good with words, but we're reprocessing and reprocessing to get an end result that we could have actually taken 4 steps back. I just wonder about the cost in that part of the cost and the emissions of that part of the reprocessing. Like, it's just a thought process. I'm not saying what I'm saying is the right thing to do at all, but that has to be in there in the thought. Like, we've got forages that are designed for that, and if we go away from that, should we be milking a pig or something else? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
Pigs
just
produce
being
a fair
stupid,
bit, Neville.
but it's a thought process.
So maybe just to come to a couple of points, I'll send you a paper that I wrote a number of years ago, only about 4 years ago, called Cattle, Climate and Complexity, that addresses those very issues. But in doing that paper, I found that the vast majority of what we feed in terms of grains in Australia is not fit for human use. And one of the really important points about adopting and utilising feeds like wheat mill run, dried distillers grains, the byproducts that we utilise, crop residues, is that for each kilo of vegan feed, there's basically 4 kilos of non-human usable feed that's produced that then goes into the cattle systems or the sheep systems and allows us to both subsidise the cost of human food, but also produce high quality, absolutely essential nutrients for humans. So when you look at our grazing systems or our dairy systems, the paper shows you the differences in efficiency around critically needed nutrients, and particularly things like the fatty acids that go into humans and increase cognitive development. So I think there's one other dimension to your question, and I apologise, John, a bit long. I'll be super brief. The other dimension to the question is that one of the things that stunned me when I went to America and did my PhD was that the diets I was feeding in America weren't as nutrient dense as the pastures I was feeding in Australia. And that just baffled the hell out of me. But then what I realised was it's access to feed that's critical. It's balanced diet that's critical. So those things make a bigger difference than the fact that it's forage or concentrate or byproduct or whatever. So thank you.
Thanks very much for the question. Can we please thank Elaine again? Thanks very much.